Watch this.
It's one of Idaho's top industries, but you can't do it without access to Idaho's water. And right now there's a fight over who has it and who's following the rules, with the newer generations at the center of it. Another chapter in the epic water rights battle that has lasted almost as long as the Gem State. Almost as exciting as water rights, government documents. A new nonprofit is hoping to help the public get access to them in an effort to keep government more transparent. We are revisiting the history of one of downtown Boise's central corner blocks and what's going on there for the future. You know, this time of year, usually a good time for a water fight, unless that water fight involves farmers and lawyers and cutting off access to that water. Well, then it's never a good time. For those who don't pay attention to such things, there is a really big water fight happening right now in Idaho. A battle over water rights between who can use groundwater and who can use surface water. This conflict certainly isn't new to Idaho, with surface water users having more senior water rights and those with legal access to the water and canals. That's what that means. And the groundwater users, who get the second option of groundwater access, having to get the water from actually underground. It's been that way in Idaho since, well, forever. First in time, first in rights is how it works in Idaho. But now there's a threat of curtailment for groundwater users, because apparently they're not in compliance with an 8-year-old statewide agreement. Negotiations are continuing, have been for the last couple of days. Joe, you've been talking about this for, well, I guess even earlier this week, you kind of touched on this topic. What is happening today? What's the latest?
Well, at this point, the negotiations are ongoing, and at this very moment, I would imagine that the camps are still debating back and forth, and we'll continue to follow this closely. But really, the major problem here, the eastern Snake Plain aquifer has been declining since the 1950s, and that's when groundwater pumping really increased for irrigation. So that has reduced the aquifer, or the groundwater levels, and the spring flows that end up feeding the surface water sources. So the issues between surface and groundwater users created the development of a methodology, or a measurement, to determine impact to senior water users. An agreement was finalized in 2016 between surface water and groundwater groups, and it required that groundwater groups have reductions of 13% across regions by each individual district. So there's also a dispute over how all of this is calculated. Idaho's Lieutenant Governor Scott Bedke, he helped to broker the 2016 deal, and he's now at the table trying to help and figure out this one too. The stakeholders, for the most part, are all up in Sun Valley, and they're basically in day 3 now of major negotiations. I spoke with the Lieutenant Governor a short time ago about what all Idahoans should know about this and what the temperature of the negotiations look like.
The average Idahoan needs to know that there are ongoing negotiations as we speak to fix this. And they're very pragmatic people on both sides of the issue and at the state level that want to avoid harming anyone economically, and that everyone's farm is important, and that we want to keep and maximize the number of acres that are under cultivation in Idaho each year. But when we do that, we also got to remember that it's a finite resource, and allocating scarce resources, whether it's money or water, is always is tricky business. But the take-home message today is that Idahoans need to know that we're on top of this, and we're working it out like Idahoans do, and that is at the negotiation table. And farmers negotiating with farmers is going to be a better outcome than farmers taking other farmers to court. Most of the water still in Idaho is still used for agriculture. And that's kind of what makes Idaho a great state, is all the agriculture that we have here. And whether that water comes from out of the ground or from the surface water systems, we all need to be careful with it.
Water has not been shut off yet.
To my knowledge, it has not.
In terms of the negotiations, what's the temperature in the room? I guess, what's the optimism look like?
Well, it depends on the room. But these water districts have met. They met yesterday afternoon, and in the evening they met already today. And the reports that I hear are the basis of my optimism. I think that we may have gone up to the cliff and looked over, but nobody wants to jump yet.
So we are closely monitoring those negotiations. And again, as far as we know, no water has been shut off. And Brian, the goal is to not do that. We've heard from the groundwater users, whether you agree with them or not, their concern is losing water at this point will impact their fields, their agriculture, and then the trickle-down effect in terms of supply, in terms of equipment rental. There's a lot of, I guess, knobs and levers that are affected by these decisions, and it is very complicated. But every Idahoan and really everyone in this region is greatly affected by it.
I was going to ask, what is the, I don't know, the person in Meridian right now, how does this affect them should these negotiations continue on or water gets shut off?
Right. And so it may not, if water is shut off in the Eastern Plains, you may say, well, that's not my problem. Well, if you are someone that's buying something that is manufactured out there and they can't get as much crop out because of that, it's a major trickle-down effect. So we will keep an eye on this one.
All right. Thanks, Joe. All right. First, it was the Caldwell School District who decided to cut, who made some cuts, making $5.5 million. Cutting $5.5 million on Monday. Well, now the Kuna School District approved $2.5 million in cuts at their board meeting. And this happened last night, which roughly about the same amount of the failed levy that they were asking for back in May. The district says they needed to make those cuts, well, because that levy failed. And the pandemic era federal money just ran out. Well, now roughly 20 jobs are gone. 3 people will not have a job at all within the Kuna School District: the director of strategic partnerships, a nurse, and a communications specialist. The rest, they're going to slide into another position, or they're retiring or just leaving the district. Most of the people we spoke to at the meeting last night said they are fine with the end result, especially since the district will just close the annex of Hubbard Elementary instead of an entire school while they fix a leaky roof. Most of the students at Hubbard are going to squeeze into the main building, and some of the preschoolers are going to move off-site. The district, though, still needs to cut another $3.2 million. That's going for the 2025-2026 school year. So more cuts are expected. Spokesperson says they plan on pulling several $1 million from savings while they figure out where that money is going to come from. The next school year, though, they're either going to make more cuts or they're going to hope another election, well, just might go their way. You know, car racetracks, they can't run any races without a pace car. And right now, the Meridian Speedway can't find their pace car. And they're asking for your help in finding the conspicuous Corvette. Abby Davis explains their pace car predicament and everything else you might need to know in today's 411.
The 2 men involved in a prison break and hospital shooting are now indicted in Nez Perce County for murder. They're accused of killing 83-year-old James Monty, who was found dead near Leland, Idaho. Police arrested Nicholas Umfenauer and Skylar Mead in March after 36 hours on the run. Police say Umfenauer allegedly shot and injured 2 Idaho Department of Correction officers at a Boise hospital while helping Mead break out of custody. State police are also investigating the death of another man in this case, 72-year-old Gerald Don Henderson. No charges have been filed. A brush fire at Devil's Corral just outside Twin Falls is now over 38 acres. We still don't know how the fire started or if anyone was hurt. Please stay out of the area. Meridian Speedway can't find its fairly reliable Bob's pace car, and they need your help finding it. If you've seen the car or have any information about it, call the Meridian Police Department's non-emergency line at 208-888-6678. If you find it, you could win a season pass plus a family's worth of tickets for one event of your choosing. The 89th Annual Emmett Cherry Festival kicked off today. Head to Emmett City Park for live music, carnival rides, and of course, all things cherries. The festival runs through Saturday and is free for everyone. We're just 43 days out from the Summer Olympics in Paris, France. If you want to cheer on Team Idaho, then check out our full Team Idaho tracker right now on ktvb.com. You'll learn about qualifiers, hopefuls, and confirmed athletes. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Davis.
We've still got some spring flowers out there, but those temperatures are definitely feeling more like summer. And that trend will continue for the next few days. Today is actually a little bit cooler than the conditions we saw yesterday. We've had a little bit of those breezy winds kicking up overall, making it a little bit more pleasant to be outside. And now we will undo all of that as temperatures increase on Thursday and bring the valleys back into the 90s. But also that warm up is also going to be short-lived because we have a more significant cool down that we are expecting for the weekend. So just keep that in mind for some of your Father's Day plans or weekend plans, camping. If you're going camping, just know those high temperatures will not be what we saw this past weekend where they were on the warmer side. So right now we are closer to the mid 80s in valley areas. You can see the mountains in the 70s for some spots and 80s over in Haley and close to the mid 80s also in the Magic Valley areas. And we did have some breezy winds today. Some of those gusts were a little on the stronger side. If you look over at Ontario where they saw a maximum gust of 43 miles an hour, you might be thinking, well, it didn't really feel that windy in Ontario today. Just know that happened in the overnight hours as a cold front moved through the area. So that happened at around 3 a.m. as the dry cold front moved through the area. So that did kick up the wind. So maybe if something in your yard was moved this morning, that could be why. And the reason for the slight dip in temperatures that we're seeing today is because the low pressure center to our north is bringing in a little bit more of that cooler air with it. But then as we get closer to tomorrow, the high pressure ridge builds back in. And then we'll see those temperatures increase. And you can see also with the direction that the winds are rotating, we will see a little bit more moisture routed into our area as well. So that's going to bring some storm chances for a few people, but just know tonight a little bit more on the comfortable side before things get back up in temperature tomorrow. So you can see 70s even in the later evening hours. If you want to go for a walk, just know the sun sets around 9:30 in Boise this time of year. And you can see those temperatures increasing once again for tomorrow. So closer to the 90s tomorrow. Again, lots of sunshine. We won't see as breezy of the conditions that we're seeing today. And so maybe feeling a little bit less pleasant tomorrow. But here's those storm chances for some of the Magic Valley areas. You can see it's low. It's something that could be possible, that is possible, but not on the higher likely side. You can see some of that shower activity and storm activity continuing into the early morning hours of Friday. That will be a little bit more of a situation that we'll watch in real time tomorrow afternoon and see how those conditions come together. But again, for a lot of us, it's going to be dry and we won't see too many clouds. Along with that moisture over in the Magic Valley, we will see more of those clouds increase. But again, Boise expecting a high of 93 again tomorrow. We dip back down slightly on Friday, but then here's the weekend where the big changes start to come in and you can see we get even down into the 60s by the start of the new week before we bump back up those temperatures.
You know, as journalists, part of our job is requesting public records from government agencies. That information helps us support the stuff we put into our stories. Sometimes they're the basis of our stories. It's supposed to be information available to the public for transparency in government, because you have to have, you have a right to know what the government is doing. And the best way to know that is for journalists like us and others to ask for that information. And I'm sure there are many of you out there who are wondering, ooh, fascinating, requesting documents from the government. About as exciting as filing your taxes. So why should I care? Well, remember back in the middle of the pandemic, when Idaho's lieutenant governor, that'd be Janice McGeachin, she decided to form a special task force to look into whether Idaho's public schools were, quote, indoctrinating students with critical race theory, Marxist or socialist teachings. But when members of Idaho's media asked to see the feedback that she was seeing that were sent in to the task force, to see what kind of stuff they were saying or they said was happening, or if they believed in the task force in the first place, McGeachin balked on providing all that information asked for in those public information requests, only providing heavily redacted copies, and only after being asked several times, claiming she was, quote, protecting whistleblowers.
We are here for one reason. I was trying to protect parents, teachers, and students who were blowing the whistle at some of the things that were happening in their communities. My goal was never to withhold public comments from the press, but to protect Idahoans from the media.
That was back when she held a press conference explaining why she was being sued, because she was eventually sued, and she lost, and she was forced to provide those documents in full to those that requested it. That's just one high-profile case. So we don't always get the records back to us that we request, and sometimes our requests get improperly denied. Sometimes agencies just want to charge a large fee to complete that request. In Idaho, the only way to fight that denial is in court, which is sometimes expensive and also time-consuming. So to help alleviate some of those costs and to help with the public getting access to that, with the process of getting access to that, there's a group of Idaho journalists that are forming a nonprofit to not only financially fight those denials in court, but to also educate those who want to know what Idaho public record laws are. Aspen Shumpert spoke to one of their board members today to hear how it will all work.
The wrestle to get access to documents that taxpayers have a right to see.
We don't have the money to pay a lawyer every single time this happens.
In Idaho, public records for all government agencies are supposed to be open to the public, unless specifically noted in Idaho's public records law.
So we're dealing with hundreds of public employees, some of whom get dozens or hundreds of public records requests a year. And they don't always fully understand the public records law.
If you feel a government agency has improperly denied a public records request, what should you do?
The vast majority of the time, when somebody improperly denies a public record for citizens or journalists, or over-redacts or overcharges, usually we can clear that up with a phone call.
Melissa Davlin, president of the Idaho's First Amendment Association, says most of the time that works, and it's how she prefers to handle it. But when you still don't get anywhere?
Unfortunately, in Idaho's law, the only recourse legally is to sue.
That takes time and resources, but now a group of Idaho journalists, including Davlin, are coming together to help out when it does. They created the nonprofit Idaho's First Amendment Association. It's set to not only educate journalists and the public through trainings and workshops on how to fight for records, but also support financially in the fight in court. Davlin is also president of the Idaho Press Club, a partner of the nonprofit who's taken government agencies to court before.
In 2019, we successfully sued Ada County to get records about the Western Idaho Fairgrounds. And then a few years ago, we sued then Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeachin over records on a task force that she was running. And in both cases, we won.
But sometimes record denials go unchallenged, and fighting a denial isn't realistic for some.
20 years ago, if your newsroom or my newsroom ran into an issue, a lot of times we had in-house counsel with the company, and we would be able to sue ourselves. We would be able to pursue that independently. That's not the case anymore. The stark reality of journalism right now is that newsrooms are shrinking, budgets are shrinking, weekly local papers are closing down. There are fewer eyes and ears on those local county commission meetings or those local school board.
She says the government transparency is necessary for journalists to do their jobs and for citizens to know what their government is doing.
When we are freed up to report on what the government is doing, as opposed to spending our time fighting for records that we're entitled to, it's so much better for everybody.
The nonprofit's work is just beginning, but a more collaborative future with government agencies is what they're hoping for.
I would love to be in a place where we don't feel like we have to fight for public records, either in the courtroom or over the phone, where everybody understands that transparency benefits everybody, both government officials and the citizens of Idaho.
The formation of this nonprofit has been in the works for years. Davlin says conversations have been going on far more than 10 years, and now it's turned into reality. Brian.
Okay, so the question then is the nonprofit, who funds this? Like, where's the funding coming from? And for requests, like I think the University of Idaho is asking for like $2,500 to see some of their access or their documents when it comes to the University of Phoenix deal. Like, are they gonna be able to pay for that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. Davlin says they're still in the foundation phase of this nonprofit, so they're actively searching for grants and fundraising opportunities. If anyone wants to donate, you can do so on their website, and that will also be linked on our website later tonight.
So they've been working on it for a long time, but they still need that funding to kind of push it to the next level. All right, thank you very much, Aspen. A lot of comments about water rights in Idaho, something that's been going on for a long time here in the state, and it's an important one. May not be as exciting, but it is important. So this is about water use. No groundwater should be used to irrigate alfalfa. It is a water hog. Need to move to crops that use less water or start taking marginal irrigated land out of production. It requires action now, says Rick. About the alfalfa stuff, though, how are you going to feed the cows at the dairy or any other ag entity that eats alfalfa? You need to grow that too. That costs, and that's a necessity. The fight for water rights is currently between agriculture users, but what about cities and farmers? Most cities use groundwater. Can cities have their water use curtailed as the total amount of water diminishes? That's a good question, Mike, but I'm not sure about that answer. Maybe we can find that out. I do know that ag uses a lot of that water. A vast majority of that water is used by farms, dairy, and otherwise. Kuna and Caldwell schools cuts following their bond levy failures. That's what this one is about. Public schools are funded by the state budget expenditures and local property taxes. Yes, in and around 2010, our legislature eliminated 20% of that funding, thus leading to our perpetual school levy appeals. And 3, Idaho requires 2/3 of the votes to pass such a request. Thank you, Republicans. That's true what happened. And we've also been ruled by the Idaho State Supreme Court that the legislature is not funding the school system properly. We've started to pump a little bit more money into that, but still, as we've learned after talking to several of these school districts that are putting forth these levies and these bonds, it doesn't cover all of it, all that is needed when it comes to the programs that some of these students and their parents ask them to provide. It's a shame some school districts use pandemic funds to set budgets, especially when those funds were short-term. Hopefully the poor leaders of those districts are those losing their jobs, says Larry. Well, that funding, that even though it was short-term, helped alleviate some of the problems they had been seeing for years, as I just said. So it did help, but yes, they still need more help. Wake up, people. You don't pass necessary levies to fund necessary public needs. You end up with less than you need. Yes, your kids aren't affected, but once other people pay for your kids, that's what happened one time, says Charlie, who's a mother and a grandmother. We'll see you tomorrow.